Hello, everyone. I am Reiki Master Sharon, and I'm here today with Austin C. Jacob. And if you are here on Austin's channel, hello and welcome. And if you're here on my channel, hello and welcome. This segment I call the Meeting of the Minds. Today we're going to be talking about the divine feminine energy and this balance between the masculine and feminine energy, and why the divine feminine is so sacred and so important for us to understand healing as a collective. So, Jacob, or sorry, Austin, would you like to? I hate doing that. I'm sorry. Go
Okay.
ahead and let me know if there's anything that you'd like to kind of start off with the collective today.
Yeah, I think we should start off by orienting this conversation and letting maybe giving a broad kind of framework for we're not talking about necessarily a gender or an identity with a gender. This is equally applicable to any gender, both genders, however your view is on that. We're talking about energy. So if you wouldn't mind, go ahead and give us a like a formal or informal definition to kind of give the framework and language that we're going to be throwing around during this our chat today.
Oh, thank you, Austin. I think that it's wonderful that you're here with me today because I feel like we can kind of have that dynamic between us as, you know, a physical feminine and a physical masculine. But um, really, what we're talking about here is on an energetic level. And everyone has a balance of masculine and feminine energies within them. And the divine feminine is really kind of like this dark womb of creation, kind of where the seed is planted to grow and cultivate. It's nurtured there. Things are magnetized to it. And then we have the masculine energy, which is more electric. It's kind of more of a safety and stability and security. It's what protects the divine feminine. It's what puts the divine feminine's ideas into action. So when you have an idea and you're cultivating it within your feminine energy, then your masculine energy comes in to support it. It comes in to hold those boundaries that for things that might uproot your seed. There's things that we learn as we go on how to grow things into our reality. And sometimes those take energetic boundaries. And that's where the masculine kind of comes in to give that safety and security and stability and that action to move forward and that push. But the divine feminine is kind of more connected to, I would say, the spiritual realm, where you're picking more up on the intuition and the divine guidance of how to move forward and which actions to take. And I think that is something important for us to cultivate before we go into the action. Did that kind of cover it pretty well?
Yeah, yeah, no, that was beautiful. Some things that I'd love to add to that. The way I see feminine energy is it's like raw, just power, untamed. You could even view it as chaotic, but in the best way. And I love how you said that, masculine will come in and then support, which there's a little bit of nuggets in that. And one part I think a lot of people get tripped up on is, which came first. Drop that identifying which one came first. The simple truth is that they're like almost like polar opposites. They're one and the same, and you need both in order to have creation to exist, to have an experience. I also heard you mention about, feminine energy being more magnetic and masculine energy being more electric. Absolutely. And so, you know, when I view feminine energy, I think of like the raw, visceral, limitless power and like almost like the cause. If you're familiar with Gnostic texts, this is the Sophia consciousness. This is the grand cosmos before material, physical realm can then be experienced. And I love, like I said earlier, that you threw out there how they support each other, because this isn't like a one-off relationship. These energies within each of us, they play out not only internally, for creation and for experiences, for action, for will, for emotion, but also all around us. Especially in a lot of my alchemical studies, this relationship is constantly going on all around us all the time, and in perfect balance. You know, Another thing to know about feminine energy is, like you mentioned, the intuitive side. There is a strong relationship to the intuition and this feminine aspect of nature, you know um in the same way that a masculine energy would have a stronger relationship to certain aspects. But I don't want people to get so much caught up in oh, well, I'm a man, so that means I'm more one way or the other. You might be identifying that way, true, but on an energetic level, what's important to know about these things is they are polar opposites. So if you are facing one side of the coin, so to speak, you're completely missing the fact that it's a coin. You are a coin, and you carry both of these within you. Um, yeah, anything you want to add to that?
So as you were speaking, I was thinking about I watched a tarot reader, or he's more of an energy reader. His name's he has a channel called Steve's Love Tarot, and he sometimes explains how the Empress energy is magnetic, and the Empress can kind of be okay on her own, but when the Emperor is on his own, it's kind of more controlling. And it makes me think of that dynamic in Pistis Sophia, where she had to overcome the false light to embrace the true light. She was chasing kind of the false light, and she wasn't able to rise until she was able to get over that sense of, I would say, like a wounded ego kind of thing, and embrace the true oneness with the creator to rise past that 12th aeon into the 13th aeon. And it makes me think of this dynamic of needing to push past that wounded ego to get to that point where we can create in a better light. Because if you're creating from a more wounded aspect, then it does tend to be more manipulative and controlling, whether you're a man or a female. It's just, if you don't have that nurturing aspect, if you don't have that empathetic aspect, if you don't have that intuitive aspect of knowing that you're connected to the creator and that you have a purpose and that you are self-loving and things like that, when you try to create from that wounded aspect, your results show in how you're showing up in that masculine energy as well. Because if you are trying to cultivate something from that more dense energy, I feel like before you do the work, it's more so like you almost feel like you have to have a sense of manipulation, power, and control to control around you because you haven't been able to control within you. And we don't truly have control over any other being. We all have free will. So, in this dynamic, I feel like it's so important for us to heal the divine feminine first so that we can kind of catapult into a higher timeline. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. So I'm hearing the importance, to focus on our roots, focus on this mother aspect, this feminine energy, this feminine origin, whether it's, you want to look at it with Sophia, or simply the mother wound, which is a trauma that we all subconsciously endure, whether we can articulate that or become aware of it later. We endure that. We endure that. Um, One thing that I wrote down that I wanted to just compound on is either one of these energies, which I do want to orient this towards like identifying some of the things within the patriarchy and matriarchy and bloodlines. But I wanted to also throw out there that either one of these energies alone, like isolated on their own, will fail. They complement each other, and there's a reason for that. The deeper you go into say esoteric studies, it shows up again and again and again and again and again. There is significance to that. Like think of the four basic elementals. Air and water are more categorized as feminine signs, whereas fire and earth are more, masculine. But if you're familiar with alchemy, they all play a part in raising up this consciousness, the thing that we all came here to do. So then now back to this wounding, and but before I jump into kind of laying out my opinions about the matriarchy, do you have anything that's coming to mind to direct our conversation with, um, like healing or holding space, giving awareness to, or something that's spirit's asking you to share right now about that?
Something that I feel coming up to share that I feel is very important is that we have a conscious decision on the perspectives that we choose to cultivate or hold on to. And we might have a perception that is cultivated within us in our youth, and we can choose whether or not we want to hold on to that and if we want to be chained to that or if we want to grow from that and take on another perspective. Like, for instance, you could take on a perspective that you're not supported or that, your family isn't really there for you. Now, if you decide to hold on to that, you're going to continue seeing that showing up in your reality because that's now a limited belief that you've placed on yourself, even if that is something that you've experienced within your reality. But you can also choose to decide that you are lovingly supported and allow that to show up into your life and other dynamics, even if it's not from your bloodline family. And in doing that work, I think it also helps to cultivate healing within your own bloodline. So I
And
think,
you're speaking on, both men and females, where
yeah,
this feminine energy becoming aware of where might I be over identifying, or where might I not be aware of it needing to be balanced or even healed, can affect then how they play together to, live a fruitful life, so to speak. It,
right.
okay. Yeah. One thing
So,
that oh, go ahead.
oh, no, go ahead. I was just saying, I think that would go well into going into the bloodlines because I feel like you might have more to add on that.
Yeah, bloodlines. So I've been pe- doing a lot of research into, well, light research, I should say, into ancient civilizations. And one of the common themes that are coming up for in my observation is this matriarchy and, um, like generational, I don't have a better word than power, but stature or importance, and how, um, I don't know the dates, but it was systematically almost placed onto us all, this patriarchy. And this is my own opinion, but what I see, and observing, and all the things I can collectively think of right now, that it almost like backfired in a way that kind of putting, masculine energy, whether it was a woman figure or a male figure, but putting this masculine energy almost on this pedestal as if it's more important, like Mary Magdalene, like all these things, almost like backfired, because in absent of the feminine energy, not necessarily a woman, not necessarily a man, of, feminine energy, but by almost pushing it away, to keep in power this patriarchy, it's gonna see its own like, help me out here, Sharon, but what I'm seeing is, almost like it's coming around to people realizing, oh, they both have to actually play together. There has to be this harmonizing of them
Yeah,
both, because if any one of them stays up, it falls. And I could, make an assumption that the same thing or similar thing happened when we were in times of matriarchy, where, maybe, the male energy figures did not understand their role in containing that chaos, containing that power, not to control now, y'all. And that's where I feel like, the men got up and were like, we don't need this, we're the structure holders, whatever. And look how it's backfired. Because now I feel like the world is realizing how important this sacred feminine energy is. Um, and when we talk about healing this wounded feminine aspect of us, um, whether you're a man or a female, it's supporting then not only the realignment of these energies, the global consciousness ascension in a more meaningful way, in my opinion, but also supporting its polar opposite. And it goes both ways with that. So right now, just because of the time that we're in and we're going into Aquarius and all these things, um, it's going to show up more and more and more and more and more. And so I think what me and Sharon both really are trying to impress on our audience today is the importance of not dismissing what's coming up. Because often, like, say, emotions and the intuitive, the unspoken gnosis, the unspoken anomalies, power, that's all feminine energy acting. It doesn't speak as loud as, say, a masculine energy, which could be, vocal or physical, like physical as in like material. So keep your non-physical ears out.
Yeah, I agree. Is it okay if I intercede now or?
Please, yeah.
So, as you were speaking, like I've also dug into some, you know, religions and spiritual things in antiquity, and what I see is like in ancient Egypt, they actually had, um, high priestess that were women that were, you know, treated as equals in their society, and I think that is why they were probably I think that's why the Atlanteans and the Egyptians were able to cultivate such iconic civilizations because they knew the power of working together in both of those energies. And I do think that it's been suppressed, and I do think that there has been a lot of back and forth arguing because there's been a lot of wounding in these dynamics. And for me, as a feminine I identify as a feminine energy. I see that like through my wounding, I kind of, and my mom's wounding, like I would see certain things happening in my life or with other feminines around me where I would see very negative traits of wounded feminine energy because of things that have happened in their life. Because you got to think, I'm a millennial. Are you a millennial too?
I am.
Okay, well, my parents are kind of boomers, right? And you got to think that their parents lived through probably World War One and World War Two, and
Yeah,
that is encoded in their DNA, and then they are like the next generation after that. So they have a lot of wounding that they were suppressed and weren't encouraged to speak about. Once we got to our generation, we got a lot more knowledge about how, mental health works and things like that. And we got words to describe and really feel into the things that our parents necessarily didn't have the resources to break down. And now we're starting in our generation to be able to do that. And I think it's a very important and powerful work because our parents see that work through us. And that gives them an opportunity to heal that as well. It goes back and it goes forward because then our children see that, and then our children will probably be even more intuitive than us, and they will see wounds that we have, and they're going to help us through that. So,
exactly.
you know, eh, for me, the wounded feminine energy is someone who is manipulative and controlling and, may stalk you or, be deceptive and try to, twist your reality to not make you think that it is something that it is, or, maybe tell you a lie to get you to tell the truth or what they think that you're the truth that you're withholding or things like that. And or to be gossipy. You see that in the Bible with I don't remember which book it is, but I know that they told the women of the church to, not talk in church because they were gossiping too much. So then these are the things that I see as being wounded feminine energy because they weren't able to drop into their intuition. They weren't able to tap into their empathy and divine guidance and their spiritual connection. And they went more into a wounded masculine energy to where they were doing these things to protect themselves. It was a defense mechanism more
Yeah,
so.
I can very much see that. You know, in my own upbringing, one of the terms I came across in just my own journey is toxic masculinity, which just briefly is kind of what you're talking about, where it's really equally a wounded feminine. But in this term that I just said, toxic masculinity, the way I heard it described to me was it's almost like supporting or adding fuel to the fire of this wounded feminine, and like shutting the door, so to speak, or not allowing these aspects to be recognized, or you actually threw out a good term, nurturing them. You know, I just identifying as a man here, what I see in other men is this fear is the best word. This fear of allowing, let's just keep it simple. So emotion, you know, there's like this idea that I see so many gentlemen have, that showing emotion means X, Y, and Z. It means I'm too girly. It means I'm X, Y, Z. And yet, when a bunch of men are together and like there's no women around, you would be surprised at how feminine they are. Because it's almost like they let down this whole guard. But so in toxic masculinity, what I see is that's when it's almost there's an intention to somebody who is wounded femininely wants to validate that wounding by imposing that on somebody else. It's almost like how hurt people, same kind
Yeah.
of difference. So for our audience, you know, in wrapping up here, can you give us, since you do identify with the feminine more so, can you give us some tangible or practical ways in which we could start, everybody, me including, addressing some of these wounds, whether they're surface level or, you know, deeper? I know one thing we brought up was like mother healing, but what else do you think our viewers might need to know when they, you know, want to start taking this seriously to, you know, uplift themselves and people around them?
For me, what I had to do to really start nurturing my divine feminine energy was to remember that I am connected and I am a fractal of source, and that I am, connected to God, and He is always lovingly nurturing and supporting and protecting me. And this is source energy is a balance, a true pure balance of masculine and feminine energy. So when you're able to rely on that, it can help you in that healing process because you get the nurturing, you get the guidance, you get the protection physically and emotionally, and you get what you need to heal. And it might not be what you think that you need to heal, but you always get what you need to heal.
Yeah.
And sometimes it can be harsh. And sometimes people, unfortunately, don't always make it through those trials and tribulations. Sometimes people, unfortunately, make the ultimate sacrifice, and I believe that those souls probably do have to end up reincarnating and go back and try to relearn
And
what they
that's the
came to
feminine energy at work, that that silent
wound.
power of, I don't need to bark because you're gonna like, that's the power of the feminine energy, guys. That is why reincarnation is able to even happen, because it's asking you to notice it, to nurture it. And I think I could, sorry to cut you off. I think I
Okay.
could redirect the question a little bit, because what's coming to my mind is, you know, for I'm pretty familiar with feminine energy myself, but for people who might not be, would you say that focusing on the mother father child dynamic or a mother wound, like is there a, well, obviously there's not everyone in their own way, but do you have a suggestion of, no, you should look at maybe the more internal aspects, your own consciousness, or maybe, start with the mother and
I
go at
think
it in that way? How do you kind of see that?
I think it's a little bit of both because what you're experiencing within the perceptions that you've cultivated from childhood is a mixture of wounds of your mother and father. So when you are looking at an aspect and you recognize a belief that you have that makes you really sad or hurts you, you once you realize that you have the power to look at it in a different perspective, that's when I think true healing starts. Because instead of thinking, oh, my parents just didn't care about me, or they just didn't nurture me, or they were too, you know, caught up with their own stuff, they abandoned me, they went away, they did whatever, you can really drop in and think, why did they do that? What happened to them to make them react in that way? Because that's not a normal human response for someone to act that way. It's not a normal human response for someone to abandon their child or to be mean to their child or to abuse their child or neglect their child. Something happened to that person in their life that made them feel that they needed to do that to remain safe within themselves. And unfortunately, you are caught in that crossfire. Now, once we get to realize that our parents are acting out of their own wounding, then we can have compassion for them and saying, okay, what happened to them to make them act that way? What were my grandparents really like? Because they probably weren't what I experienced. They were probably totally different people when they were younger. Or you might not have even known your grandparents to know what they were like. So until we can sit down and have those conversations, which are very vulnerable, I think those things can really open doors to healing, but we have to be open and not really be so focused on the blame of what someone else did to us to hurt us, because we can get really trapped in that guilt and shame cycle. And what we really are aiming for is a resolution for, because the person that hurt you, you love. And if you didn't love them, they wouldn't hurt you. The things that they did wouldn't have hurt you if you didn't love them and you didn't want to have a relationship with them. But sometimes there are different aspects where within free will, sometimes people don't take the initiative to do that healing within their own selves. But we have to remember where our power is within ourselves. Like for me, I remember being a child or a teenager and just wishing that, my parent would reach out to me or say, happy whatever season it was, or just to say that they loved me when they got off the phone. And that would have made a huge difference in reinforcing the idea that I wanted to have, that I was, loved and cared for. But she was also hurt too within the things and the dynamics that happened that were playing out because of her perceptions. And I had to work through her perceptions and my perceptions to be able to come to a more neutral ground to where I could say, okay, I'm hurt, she's speaking out of wounding and acting out of wounding, and so am I. How do we get to a place where we're in love again?
Yeah. This sounds a lot like, generational, um, healing, like stopping that cycle,
Yeah.
changing your own DNA in a way that you can activate it, because you touched on it earlier with the new generations and generations in front of us, or behind, well, yeah, in front of us. Um, that's why this is so important to start integrating this knowledge, whether it's healing the feminine, healing the masculine, because you do one, its polar will come up.
Hmm.
But if we isolate one or the other, it's going to affect the other one. So really important stuff. And I can tell that you have, like your own set of stories of how you recognize this in your own life, and you're obviously a generational curse breaker, so to speak. So, in summarizing up, how can people get in touch with you specifically If they want to know more and start identifying, walking the path with you, so to speak, to um, start integrating this for their own life, letting them see their own sacred feminine power.
So if people would like to connect with me, I have a website, it is reikimastersharon.com. I also have my YouTube page, which is Reiki Master Sharon. I have a Facebook page, Reiki Master Sharon. You can message me there. And I'm also on TikTok and Instagram, but not as much. So you're probably better off reaching me like either in my business email, which is Reiki Master Sharon, Reiki Master Sharon 717 at gmail.com. Or you can, message me on Facebook and you can reach me that way. But, I really do want to continue doing this work. This is a very big passion for me to help people to realize that there are healthy coping mechanisms to kind of break these mindsets and transmute them into a higher perspective that's going to really help us find peace within that. So, is there any way that people can reach you to kind of further this knowledge of bloodlines and things like that and those kinds of healings?
Uh, yes, thank you for that opportunity, and thank you for calling me forth to have this conversation with you and kind of show how bridging information, whether it's feminine or masculine, just anybody, reach out, guys, reach out. Don't try to do this all alone, all by yourself. That would be sticking with one polarity of energy. Um, you can reach me right now. I'm really just focused on two platforms, Facebook and YouTube. I will expand later, but so my YouTube is Austin C. Jacob at Austin C. Jacob, and then the Facebook is Austin Jacob C. So a little bit invert there. Just reach out however you see fit. We'll work something out. Again, thank you, Sharon, for thinking of me and having this discussion. Many more to come. Anything else you'd
Yes.
like to add?
No, I think we kind of covered a good portion of it, and I'm looking forward to, meeting with you again for another topic. So, thank you so much for being here with me today, Austin, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day. If you like this content, please like, share, and subscribe to our channels, and we'd love to see you next time. Okay.
Until next time.